Three of the world's most elite cybersecurity firms tried and failed. One lost their government contracts. One shuttered their operations in shame. One CEO resigned believing their $2 billion quantum encryption system was truly impenetrable. Yet, sometime past midnight in the gleaming towers of NeoVault Technologies in downtown Phoenix, the impossible happened. The system was breached. Not by a team of hackers, not by foreign intelligence, not even by a rival corporation, but by a night janitor. No alarms, no traces, no digital footprints. Only a quiet figure in faded work clothes who left behind a single message glowing on CEO Talira Norrell's personal workstation. Your firewall has more holes than your ego. KK. By morning, the tech world would be in chaos. But by then, Kendrick Kelther was already gone, pushing his cleaning cart down empty hallways, whistling softly to himself. If this story already has you curious, tell us where you're watching from. Like this video if you've ever been underestimated because of your job title. Drop a comment. Who do you think KK really is? Let's dive in. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Talira Norrell, CEO of NeoVault Technologies, arrived at her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower as she did every morning at precisely 6:30 a.m. Her Italian leather briefcase clicked against the polished marble as she strode through the executive wing, her 4-inch heels echoing with the authority that had built a $2 billion cybersecurity empire from nothing. She paused at her assistant's desk, expecting the usual stack of overnight security reports. What she found instead made her blood run cold. "Ma'am," her assistant Rebecca stammered, holding up a tablet with trembling hands. "You need to see this immediately." The screen displayed Talira's personal workstation, the one supposedly protected by 7 layers of military-grade encryption, accessible only through biometric scanners and quantum key authentication. But there, glowing in neon green text against her black desktop wallpaper, was a message that shouldn't exist. Your firewall has more holes than your ego, KK. Talira snatched the tablet, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping it so hard. Her knuckles went white. When was this discovered? Security found it during the 6 a.m. system check. The breach occurred at 12:47 a.m. But get this, Rebecca swallowed hard. The intrusion lasted exactly 58 seconds. No traces, no logs, no digital footprints. Whoever did this was in and out faster than our detection systems could even register the attempt. "That's impossible," Talira whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. Someone had just made a mockery of everything NeoVault stood for. The company that protected the digital assets of Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and international banks had been penetrated by someone with the audacity to leave a calling card. She stormed into her office and immediately called an emergency meeting. Within 30 minutes, her executive conference room was packed with NeoVault's top minds. Chief Technology Officer David Brennan looked like he hadn't slept, his usually pristine appearance disheveled. Head of Security Amanda Foster paced the room like a caged predator, while lead systems architect Robert Chun frantically typed on his laptop. "Tell me this is some kind of inside job," Talira demanded, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "Tell me one of our employees decided to play a prank." David shook his head grimly. "I wish I could, Talira. But we've run every diagnostic imaginable. The breach came from outside our network, penetrated 7 layers of encryption that took US 3 years to develop, left no trace code, and somehow managed to access your personal workstation, which isn't even connected to our main servers." Amanda stopped pacing and turned to face the room. The building's physical security logs show no unauthorized access. Badge scans, cameras, motion detectors, everything was normal. But here's what's bothering me most: the timestamp on the breach. Corresponds exactly with our night cleaning crew's schedule for that floor. Talira raised an eyebrow. You think the cleaning crew is somehow involved? Not necessarily involved, but the timing suggests whoever did this had intimate knowledge of our building's operations. They knew exactly when security would be at its most relaxed, when the fewest people would be monitoring systems, and when they could work undetected. Robert looked up from his laptop, his face pale. Talira, I've been analyzing the breach methodology. This wasn't script kiddie work, or even professional hacker group tactics. This was something else entirely. The attack vectors were so sophisticated, so elegant, that they bypassed our AI-driven threat detection without even triggering a single alert. Whoever did this understands our systems better than we do. The room fell silent. NeoVault's reputation was built on the promise that their quantum encryption was unbreachable. They'd spent millions in marketing campaigns claiming their systems were mathematically impossible to crack. Now someone had done exactly that and left them a taunting message to prove it. H. Lyra walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Phoenix, her reflection ghost-like against the desert landscape beyond. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city, but all she could see was the potential collapse of everything she'd worked to build. What do we know about these initials? She asked without turning around. KK. David pulled up a holographic display showing various data analytics. We've run the initials through every database we have access to. Thousands of matches, but none that fit the profile of someone capable of this level of sophisticated cyber warfare. Most are accountants, teachers, retail workers, standard civilian profiles. Keep looking, Talira said sharply. And I want to know everything about everyone who had access to this building last night. Security guards, cleaning crew, maintenance staff, everyone. Someone knows something. Amanda nodded and began making notes. I'll also review all our employee backgrounds again. Maybe we missed something, some connection to advanced cybersecurity training or underground hacking communities. As the meeting disbanded, Talira remained at the window, her mind racing. In 12 years of building NeoVault, she had faced corporate espionage, hostile takeovers, and technological challenges that would have destroyed lesser companies. But she had never felt this vulnerable, this exposed. The message wasn't just a hack, it was a declaration of war. Someone out there possessed skills that made her company's best efforts look primitive. And they had chosen to announce themselves. With an insult that cut straight to her ego, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for Marcus Delacroix, the FBI's top cybercrime investigator. If this was the work of a foreign government or organized crime syndicate, she needed federal resources. But as she prepared to dial, something stopped her. The elegance of the breach, the surgical precision, the absence of any destructive intent. This didn't feel like terrorism or corporate espionage. It felt personal, like someone was trying to prove a point. Her assistant knocked softly on the door. Ma'am, the cleaning service supervisor is here. You asked to speak with everyone who was in the building last night. Send them in. A middle-aged woman in a pressed uniform entered, clipboard in hand, looking nervous but professional. Mrs. Norrell, I'm Susan Valdez from Phoenix Professional Cleaning Services. I understand there was some kind of security incident. Someone accessed our systems last night between midnight and 1 a.m. I need to know about every member of your crew who was working on the executive floors during that time. Susan consulted her clipboard. We had 3 people working the upper levels last night. Maria Santos was on floors 38 through 40. Tommy Rodriguez handled 41 through 43. And Kendrick Kelther covered 44 through 46, including the executive wing. Talira made notes. How long have these people been working for your company? Maria and Tommy have been with us for over 5 years. Kendrick is newer, about 2 years now. He's one of our most reliable workers, though. Always on time, very. Thorough, never any complaints. I'll need their employment records, background checks, everything you have. Of course. Though I should mention, Kendrick actually has some technical background. He sometimes helps us troubleshoot our scheduling software when it glitches. He's quite good with computers. Talira's pen stopped moving. Quite good how? Oh, just basic stuff, or so I thought. He fixed a network connectivity issue for us last month that our IT consultant couldn't figure out. Saved us a lot of money. Actually, the room suddenly felt smaller. I want to speak with this Kendrick Kelther immediately. Susan checked her watch. He'll be starting his shift at 6 p.m. Should I call him in early? Yes, and Susan, I need you to keep this conversation completely confidential. Don't mention to anyone that we're asking questions about last night. After Susan left, Talira stood alone in her office, staring at the name she'd written on her notepad. Kendrick Kelther. Something about this didn't add up. A janitor with computer skills working the exact floor where an impossible breach occurred. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. She looked back at her reflection in the window, but now instead of seeing vulnerability, she saw determination. If KK thought they could humiliate her company and disappear into the shadows, they were about to learn exactly what kind of person had built NeoVault from the ground up. The hunt was about to begin. 6 floors below Talira's executive suite, in the fluorescent-lit maze of building maintenance corridors, Kendrick Kelther methodically organized his cleaning supplies with the precision of someone who understood that excellence lived in the details. His gray janitor's uniform was always clean but never new, his work boots polished but worn, and his name tag slightly crooked in a way that made him forgettable to the executives who passed him in hallways without a second glance. At 41, Kendrick had learned to move through the corporate world like a ghost. He spoke when spoken to, smiled politely when acknowledgement was required, and performed his duties with a quiet competence that earned him neither praise nor complaint. To most people at NeoVault, he was simply part of the building's infrastructure, as invisible and reliable as the elevator or air conditioning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But invisibility was exactly what Kendrick needed. He wheeled his cart through the corridors of the 44th floor, checking his route sheet with the same methodical attention he brought to everything. Room 4401, empty. Conference room, standard cleaning protocol. Room 4402, junior executive office, light dusting and trash removal. Room 4403, server maintenance closet, restricted access requiring special clearance. Most janitors would skip the restricted areas or wait for security escort. Kendrick simply produced a badge that shouldn't exist and entered alone. Inside the server room, surrounded by humming machines that processed millions of dollars in transactions every hour, Kendrick worked with practiced efficiency. But his cleaning was different here. While he dusted and organized, his eyes tracked the cable routing, server configurations, and network architecture with the focus of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. He paused at a workstation terminal, ostensibly to clean the keyboard, but his fingers moved across the keys with muscle memory that spoke of thousands of hours spent programming. Lines of code scrolled past too quickly for most people to read, but Kendrick's eyes tracked every character as he performed what appeared to be routine maintenance diagnostics. Running a bit slow tonight, aren't we? He murmured to the machine, his voice carrying the affection of someone talking to an old friend. His fingers danced across the interface, optimizing processes and clearing cache files with the casual expertise of a systems administrator. Anyone watching might have assumed he was following a checklist provided by the IT department. They would have been wrong. Kendrick was performing maintenance that NeoVault's own technicians wouldn't attempt without a team of specialists and hours of preparation. After 20 minutes, he shut down the terminal, finished his cleaning, and moved on. to the next room as if nothing unusual had happened. The servers he left behind ran 15% more efficiently than they had when he arrived. This was Kendrick's real work, performed in the shadows between his official duties. For 2 years he had been quietly maintaining, improving, and sometimes protecting NeoVault systems from vulnerabilities that their security teams hadn't even discovered yet. He left no traces, filed no reports, and never took credit. He simply fixed problems and moved on. His shift ended at 6 a.m., just as the first wave of early arriving executives began filtering into the building. Kendrick clocked out, stored his equipment, and walked through the employee exit into the Phoenix morning, where his battered Honda Civic waited in the far corner of the parking garage. The drive home took him through neighborhoods that most NeoVault employees would never see, past strip malls and apartment complexes where people worked multiple jobs to pay rent on time. Kendrick's apartment was in one of these complexes, a modest 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a building that had been luxury in 1987 but was now simply affordable. He climbed the stairs quietly, keys ready, listening for sounds from inside. What he heard made him smile for the first time since his shift began. "Dad, is that you?" The voice came through the door, high and excited and completely awake despite the early hour. "It's me, Jamie," he called back, unlocking the door to find his 8-year-old daughter sitting at the kitchen table, already dressed for school, working on what appeared to be a complex mathematics problem that would have challenged most high school students. "Look what I figured out," Jamie said, bouncing in her chair as she held up a notebook covered in equations. "I was working on that prime number sequence you showed me, and I think I found a pattern that could predict the next 17 numbers in the series." Kendrick examined her work, his tired eyes lighting up as he followed her logic. Jamie had inherited more than just his brown eyes and stubborn chin. She had inherited a mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos, connections where others saw random data. "This is exceptional work, sweetheart," he said, genuinely impressed. "You've essentially rediscovered a theorem that mathematician Bernhard Riemann spent years developing." "Really?" Jamie beamed. "Does that mean I'm smart like you?" The question hit Kendrick harder than it should have. How could he explain to his daughter that intelligence was both a gift and a burden, that being too smart in the wrong circumstances could cost you everything you held dear? "You're smart like you," he said instead, ruffling her hair. "And that's the best kind of smart there is." They had breakfast together, Jamie chattering about her school projects while Kendrick listened with the focused attention of someone who knew these moments were precious. At 7:30, he walked her to the bus stop, part of their morning routine. That anchored both their days. "Dad," Jamie said as the school bus approached, "why do you work cleaning offices instead of doing computer stuff? You're better at it than anyone." It was a fair question, one she asked in various forms every few weeks. Kendrick knelt down to meet her eyes, the same conversation they'd had dozens of times, but never quite the same way. "Sometimes the most important work happens where people aren't watching," he said. "Sometimes helping people means they never know you helped them at all." Jamie considered this with the seriousness she brought to all their conversations. Like a secret superhero? Something like that. After the bus disappeared around the corner, Kendrick walked back to their apartment and sat at the kitchen table where Jamie had been working. Her math notebook was still open, revealing not just the prime number work, but dozens of other problems she'd been exploring. Geometry proofs, algebraic equations, even some basic programming concepts he'd been teaching her. She was 8 years old, and already working at a level that would qualify her for advanced placement courses. In another life, in different circumstances, Kendrick would have been enrolling her in gifted programs and specialized schools. But those kinds of opportunities came with visibility, with questions about family background and parental qualifications, questions that Kendrick couldn't afford to answer. He looked around their modest apartment, taking inventory of their carefully constructed life. No photographs on the walls that might reveal too much about their past. No awards or certificates that might indicate his true qualifications. No books or equipment that might suggest his real capabilities. Everything designed to blend in, to appear ordinary, to avoid the kind of attention that could destroy everything he'd rebuilt. But last night, for exactly 58 seconds, Kendrick had allowed himself to be extraordinary again. The temptation had been too great, the challenge too elegant to resist. Talira Norrell's smug confidence in her unbreachable system had annoyed him for months as he cleaned around their security briefings and overheard their marketing presentations. So he had proven a point. Quietly, elegantly, with just enough style to ensure the message couldn't be ignored. Now, as he prepared for a few hours of sleep before Jamie returned from school, Kendrick wondered if he had made a mistake. His old life had ended because he'd been too confident, too willing to show off his capabilities. He'd built this new life on the foundation of calculated invisibility. But sometimes, late at night in the digital heart of NeoVault Technologies, surrounded by systems he understood better than their own creators, the temptation to be himself again was overwhelming. Last night, he had given in to that temptation. Today, he would have to live with the consequences. Kendrick woke from restless sleep at 2 p.m., fragments of old nightmares clinging to his consciousness. Like smoke. He'd been dreaming about courtrooms again, about lawyers in expensive suits explaining to a jury why his reckless endangerment of financial systems warranted a 20-year prison sentence. About the moment when everything he'd built in his previous life had crumbled to dust. 5 years ago, Kendrick Kelther had been Dr. Kendrick Kelther, Chief Information Security Officer at Meridian Financial Group, one of the largest investment banks on the West Coast. He had been 36, married to a brilliant corporate attorney named Sarah, and the father of a 3-year-old daughter who thought he hung the moon and stars. He had also been the whistleblower who exposed the largest financial fraud in modern history. Meridian's executives had been using sophisticated algorithms to manipulate high-frequency trading systems, stealing fractions of pennies from millions of transactions in a scheme that generated nearly $2 billion in illegal profits. Kendrick discovered the fraud during a routine security audit, buried in code so complex that only a handful of people in the world could have understood its true purpose. His first mistake was trusting the system to correct itself. He reported his findings to his immediate supervisor, then to the compliance department, then to the board of directors. Each time, he was told his concerns were being investigated and addressed through proper channels. Months passed. The fraud continued. Kendrick watched as ordinary investors lost their retirement savings while Meridian's executives bought vacation homes and luxury cars with stolen money. His second mistake was believing that truth would be enough. Working alone, using access credentials that technically exceeded his authorization, Kendrick gathered irrefutable evidence of the fraud. Transaction logs, algorithm specifications, communication records between executives planning the scheme. He compiled everything into a comprehensive report and delivered it simultaneously to the FBI, SEC, and 3 major newspapers. The investigation that followed led to 17 indictments, including the CEO and most of Meridian's board of directors. Nearly $2 billion was recovered and returned to defrauded investors. Kendrick was initially hailed as a hero, the honest employee who risked everything to expose corporate corruption. But heroism in the financial world was a temporary condition. Meridian's defense attorneys argued that Kendrick had exceeded his authorized access to gather evidence, technically making him a cyber criminal. They claimed his unauthorized intrusion into secure systems had compromised sensitive client information and violated federal computer fraud statutes. The government prosecutors, under pressure to avoid any appearance of prosecutorial overreach, agreed to consider charges against Kendrick in exchange for his cooperation in the Meridian case. The deal was simple: Plead guilty to misdemeanor computer fraud charges. Accept a suspended sentence and 2 years of probation, and agree never to work in financial technology again. In exchange, the felony charges would be dropped and he could rebuild his life. Kendrick accepted the deal. He had no choice. Sarah was pregnant with their second daughter, and a felony conviction would have meant years in federal prison. But accepting the deal cost him everything else. Sarah, whose corporate law career depended on maintaining an impeccable reputation, filed for divorce within a month of his guilty plea. She argued in family court that his criminal conviction and demonstrated poor judgment made him an unfit father. She relocated to Seattle with Jamie, accepting a partnership at a prestigious firm that specialized in white-collar defense. The irony was devastating. Sarah now spent her days defending the same kind of executives that Kendrick had exposed. He was permitted supervised visitation with Jamie every other weekend, but the travel expenses and legal fees quickly exhausted his savings. His conviction made him unemployable in any technology field that required security clearance. His former colleagues, many of whom privately admired what he'd done, couldn't risk associating with him professionally. Within 6 months, Kendrick had lost his career, his wife, his home, and practical access to his daughter. But the story didn't end there. 2 years into his probation, Sarah was killed in a car accident during the Seattle ice storm. She was rushing home from the office late one night when her car skidded off an overpass. The newspapers noted that she had been working on a high-profile case defending a pharmaceutical executive accused of price manipulation. The same newspapers that had once called Kendrick a hero. At Sarah's funeral, her parents announced their intention to seek custody of Jamie. They argued that Kendrick's criminal background and unstable employment situation made him an unsuitable guardian. They had money, social connections, and a legal system that favored stability over parental rights. Kendrick spent his daughter's inheritance fighting for custody, representing himself because he couldn't afford an attorney. The case dragged on for 18 months while Jamie lived with grandparents who viewed her father as a criminal and an embarrassment. He won custody by the narrowest possible margin, primarily because Jamie herself testified that she wanted to live with her father. At 8 years old, she had displayed a maturity and intelligence that impressed even the family court judge. But winning custody meant starting over completely. Kendrick used his last savings to move to Phoenix, where the cost of living was manageable, and employment opportunities existed for someone with his limitations. He found a job with Phoenix Professional Cleaning Services through a workforce development program that specialized in helping former offenders rebuild their lives. The irony was not lost on him. The man who had once protected billions of dollars in digital assets now mopped floors in the companies that had replaced his former employer. But the work gave him something precious: invisibility. No background checks beyond basic criminal history. No security clearances required. No questions about his technical qualifications or what he might have done in a previous life. It also gave him access. Cleaning after hours in corporate environments meant overhearing conversations, observing security protocols, and working around systems that most employees took for granted. Kendrick quickly realized that many companies had vulnerabilities that their own IT departments couldn't see. He began fixing problems quietly, never taking credit, never leaving traces. A server running inefficiently here, a security gap there, malware that would have corrupted payroll systems if left unchecked. He told himself he was just preventing problems, not actively engaging in the technology work that had destroyed his previous life. The rationalization worked until he started noticing more serious issues. Tax preparation companies storing client data in unencrypted databases. Medical offices using default passwords on systems containing patient records. Financial services firms running software so outdated that a teenager could have hacked their accounts. Kendrick found himself in an impossible position. He possessed the knowledge to protect these systems, but using that knowledge meant risking exposure. If anyone discovered his true capabilities, the questions would follow. Background checks, reference calls, investigations that would reveal his history and potentially cost him custody of Jamie. So he developed a compromise. He would fix critical problems anonymously, leaving only subtle traces that might guide legitimate IT professionals to the solutions. He never accessed personal data, never left calling cards, never did anything that could be traced back to him personally. Until last night. Talira. Norrell's arrogance had finally pushed him too far. For months, he had listened to her boasting about NeoVault's impenetrable security during board meetings and marketing presentations. He had watched her dismiss warnings from her own security team about potential vulnerabilities. He had seen her treat cybersecurity as a marketing problem rather than a technical challenge. The breach had been his way of delivering a reality check, proof that her confidence was misplaced and her systems were more vulnerable than she realized. But now, lying in bed in his modest apartment while Jamie was at school, Kendrick realized he might have made the same mistake that had destroyed his previous life, believing that he could expose the truth without consequences. The difference was that this time, he had more than just his own future at stake. He had Jamie, and he would do anything, sacrifice anything, to protect the life they had built together, even if it meant returning to the shadows and pretending to be ordinary for the rest of his life. Talira. Norrell paced her office like a caged predator, her Louboutin heels clicking against Italian marble in a rhythm that matched her accelerating heartbeat. 3 hours had passed since she'd learned about Kendrick Kelther's technical background, and every minute felt like watching her company's reputation bleed out through a wound she couldn't locate. "Tell me you have something," she said into her phone, speaking to Amanda Foster, who was currently 3 miles away conducting what was euphemistically called a routine security consultation at Phoenix Professional Cleaning Services. "I'm reviewing his employment file now." Amanda's voice crackled through the encrypted connection. Susan Valdez wasn't exaggerating about his technical skills. According to their records, Kelther has independently resolved network connectivity issues, database corruption problems, and software integration failures that their contracted IT support couldn't handle. "A janitor doesn't just stumble into advanced troubleshooting capabilities," Talira said, staring out at the Phoenix skyline where heat waves already shimmered despite the early afternoon hour. "What's his background?" "That's where it gets interesting. His employment application lists previous experience as technology consultant, but no specific companies. Education shows some college but no degree. References are all from local businesses, a convenience store, a auto repair shop, a family restaurant. Nothing that would indicate serious technical training." Talira stopped pacing. "He's hiding something. Or someone's hiding something for him. I ran his name through our standard background verification databases. Kendrick Kelther exists, has a clean criminal record in Arizona, pays his taxes, maintains a checking account at a local credit union. But everything starts 5 years ago. Before that, it's like he materialized out of thin air. People don't just materialize, Amanda. They relocate, they change careers, they run from something." Talira walked to her desk and activated the holographic display system, projecting a timeline of the previous night's events. "What about social media, credit history, digital footprints?" "Practically non-existent. No Facebook, no LinkedIn, no Twitter. His credit history shows a car loan and apartment rental, both established 5 years ago with a significant cash down payment. No credit cards, no major purchases, no digital shopping patterns. He's living like someone who doesn't want to be found." The implications were becoming clearer, and none of them were good for NeoVault. Either they had hired someone with genuinely dangerous capabilities who was operating under a false identity, or they had hired someone who was exactly what he appeared to be, and the breach was unrelated to him entirely. Both possibilities terrified Talira for different reasons. Where is he now? She asked. According to his supervisor, he's at home. His shift doesn't start until 6 p.m., and he's never early and never late. Susan describes him as the most reliable employee they've ever had, but also the most private. Shows up, does exceptional work, goes home. No office friendships, no social interaction beyond basic politeness. Talira made a decision. I want surveillance on his apartment. Discreet, professional, legal. If he's our guy, he might try to run. If he's not our guy, we need to eliminate him as a possibility so we can focus on finding who is. Talira, are you sure about this? Surveillance of an employee based on circumstantial evidence could create significant legal liability if someone penetrated our most secure systems and left us a message that basically calls me an incompetent amateur. Our stock price has already dropped 3 points based on rumors that we've been breached. If this story gets out before we can control the narrative, NeoVault becomes a cautionary tale instead of a market leader. She walked back to the window, watching traffic crawl through downtown Phoenix in the summer heat. I didn't build this company to watch it get destroyed by someone's idea of a practical joke. Understood. I'll coordinate with the private investigation firm we've used before. Full surveillance package, but strictly observational. No direct contact, no attempts to gain access to his residence or personal property. Good. And Amanda, I want to know the moment he does anything unusual. Makes a phone call, sends an email, searches the internet, anything that might indicate he's aware we're investigating. Copy that. Anything else? Talira hesitated then. Asked the question that had been bothering her since the morning's revelation. In your professional opinion, based on what we know so far, do you think he's our guy? There was a long pause before Amanda answered, honestly, I think he's exactly our guy. The timing, the technical capability, the deliberate anonymity, it all fits. But Talira, if I'm right, then we're dealing with someone who has skills that exceed most of our senior developers. The question isn't whether he did it. The question is what he wants and what he's capable of doing next. After ending the call, Talira sat in her executive chair and tried to process the implications. NeoVault's entire business model was built on the promise that they could protect their clients' digital assets from exactly this kind of sophisticated intrusion. If a janitor could waltz through their defenses and leave taunting messages, what did that say about their ability to protect Fortune 500 companies and government agencies? Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from the board chairman. Talira, we need to talk. Harrison Blackwell's voice carried the weight of significant financial worry. I'm getting calls from investors asking about rumors of a security incident. The stock's down 6 points now and trading volume is through the roof. Harrison, we're handling the situation. It was a minor probe, probably some script kiddie trying to make headlines. Our systems detected and contained it immediately. That's not what I'm hearing from other sources. Word is that someone left you a personal message on your private workstation. True? Talira closed her eyes, wondering who in her organization was talking to board members. We're investigating all possibilities, but there's no indication of any serious security compromise or data theft. Talira, I've known you for 8 years. I can tell when you're managing a crisis versus solving a problem. Which one is this? She looked at the message still displayed on her workstation. Your firewall has more holes than your ego. K. Every time she read it, the insult stung more sharply. It's both, she admitted. Someone with serious capabilities wanted to send us a message. We're going to find them, and we're going to make sure this never happens again. How confident are you that this doesn't represent a broader vulnerability in our systems? Harrison, I've spent 12 years building NeoVault into the most trusted name in cybersecurity. Our client retention rate is 97%. Our systems protect over $200 billion in digital assets, And we've never had a confirmed data breach. Until now, this wasn't a data breach. This was someone proving they could access our systems if they wanted to. There's a difference. Not to our clients, there isn't. Talira, I need you to understand something. If this story becomes public, before we can demonstrate that we've identified and eliminated the vulnerability, NeoVault's reputation will be irreparably damaged. We're talking about potential bankruptcy if major clients lose confidence in our capabilities. The weight of those words settled over Talira like a suffocating blanket. She had built NeoVault from a two-person startup working out of a shared office space into a publicly traded company with over 3,000 employees. The idea that it could all disappear because of 58 seconds of digital humiliation was almost incomprehensible. I understand the stakes, Harrison. Give me 48 hours. You have 24. After that, we're bringing in outside security consultants and potentially law enforcement. This can't spiral out of control. After Harrison hung up, Talira sat alone in her office as the afternoon sun painted Phoenix in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in this city was a person who had made her look foolish and threatened everything she'd worked to build. If that person was Kendrick Kelther, she was going to find out very soon. And if he thought he could challenge her and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn exactly what kind of enemy he had made. The hunt was intensifying, and Talira Norrell had never lost a hunt in her life. She wasn't about to start now. Kendrick was helping Jamie with her homework when the knock came. 3 precise raps on the apartment door, too formal to be neighbors, too confident to be solicitors. He glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Well past the time when anyone had legitimate business at their modest Phoenix apartment complex. Stay here. Sweetheart, he said quietly, marking Jamie's place in her advanced mathematics workbook. Through the window, he could see a black sedan parked in the visitor spaces, its tinted windows reflecting the security lights like dark mirrors. He looked through the peephole and saw exactly what he'd expected. A woman in an expensive business suit, perfectly styled hair, and the kind of confident posture that came from never being told no. Talira Norrell stood in his hallway like she owned it, which, given her wealth and influence, she probably could if she wanted to. Kendrick opened the door, but kept the chain latched. Can I help you? Mr. Kelther, I'm Talira Norrell, CEO of NeoVault Technologies. I think we need to have a conversation. I'm not sure what we'd have to talk about, ma'am. I just clean your offices. Talira smiled, but it was the kind of smile sharks probably displayed before feeding. I think you know exactly what we need to discuss. May I come in? Kendrick considered his options. He could refuse, close the door, and pretend this conversation never happened. But that would only delay the inevitable while making him look guilty. Better to face this directly and maintain the fiction that he was nothing more than what he appeared to be. He unlatched the chain and stepped aside. You'll have to excuse the mess. I wasn't expecting company. Talira entered and immediately began cataloging details with the sharp attention of someone accustomed to gathering intelligence. The modest furniture, the absence of expensive electronics, the kitchen table covered with Jamie's schoolwork, the single-framed photograph of Kendrick and his daughter at a Phoenix Suns game. What she didn't see were the advanced textbooks hidden in the bedroom closet, the encrypted laptop secured in a safety deposit box across town, or the mobile phone with custom security protocols that he used for his more sensitive research. Dad, who's here? Jamie appeared from the living room, her homework forgotten, studying Talira with the frank curiosity that 8-year-olds brought to unexpected situations. This is Ms. Norrell from the company where I work, Kendrick said. Jamie, why don't you finish your math problems while we talk? But Jamie was already analyzing the situation with uncomfortable insight. You don't usually have business meetings at home, Dad, and you look nervous. Talira raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. You're very observant, Jamie. How old are you? 8. Are you here to fire my dad? Because if you are, you should know he's really good at his job. He fixes things that other people can't fix. The innocent comment hit like a guided missile. Kendrick felt Talira's attention sharpen, her focus shifting from casual observation to predatory interest. What kind of things does your father fix? Talira asked, kneeling down to Jamie's eye level with the practiced charm of someone who'd learned to manipulate people of all ages, computers mostly. People bring him their broken laptops and he makes them work again. And sometimes he helps with really hard math problems that, Jamie, Kendrick interrupted gently but firmly, why don't you go work on your homework? Ms. Norrell and I need to discuss some work stuff. Jamie looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand, then reluctantly returned to the living room. But Kendrick noticed she positioned herself where she could hear their conversation, while pretending to focus on mathematics. Lyra waited until Jamie was out of sight, then turned to face Kendrick with the full force of her attention. Let's skip the pretense, shall we? Someone accessed my personal workstation last night, between 12:47 and 12:48 a.m. The breach was elegant, sophisticated, and completely untraceable through conventional digital forensics. It also occurred during your scheduled cleaning rotation of the executive floors. I clean a lot of floors, Ms. Norrell. I'm not responsible for your cybersecurity problems. The person responsible left a message. Your firewall has more holes than your ego. It was signed KK. She paused, letting the implications settle. Kendrick Kelther, KK. Kendrick maintained his expression of mild confusion, though internally he was calculating escape routes and contingency plans. Lots of people have those initials, ma'am. And I wouldn't know a firewall from a garden wall. Talira walked to the kitchen table where Jamie's homework was spread out, examining the advanced mathematical concepts an 8-year-old was casually working through. Your daughter is exceptionally gifted. She's a bright kid. These are high school level algebraic proofs. This geometric analysis would challenge most college freshmen. And this, she pointed to a page covered in what appeared to be programming notation, looks like algorithm development. She likes puzzles. Mr. Kelther, I've spent the last 6 hours learning everything I can about you. Your employment history, your background, your financial records. Do you know what I discovered? Kendrick waited, knowing that whatever she'd found was only the tip of the iceberg he'd constructed to hide his previous life. You don't exist, Talira continued. 5 years ago, Kendrick Kelther appeared in Phoenix like a ghost materializing out of thin air. No significant digital footprint, no social media presence, no credit history extending beyond your current residence. You live like someone hiding from something. I live like someone who minds his own business and expects others to mind theirs. Talira laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair enough. So let me ask you directly, did you hack into my systems last night? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Kendrick could feel Jamie listening from the next room, could sense his daughter's anxiety about this strange woman who was clearly challenging her father in ways she didn't understand. Ms. Norrell, I appreciate you coming all the way to my home to ask me that question. But I think you already know the answer, or you wouldn't be here. I know you're capable of it. The question is whether you actually did it. Kendrick studied her face, seeing the combination of fury and frustration that came from someone accustomed to having all the answers, discovering they knew nothing at all. What would you do if I said yes? I'd want to know why. The directness of her response surprised him. He'd expected threats, accusations, perhaps demands for proof or confession. Instead, she was asking about motivation, which suggested she was more interested in understanding than prosecuting. Hypothetically speaking, Kendrick said carefully, if someone had that capability, and if they had spent months listening to presentations about unbreachable security systems while observing obvious vulnerabilities, they might feel compelled to provide a reality check. So this was about my ego? Hypothetically, this was about truth. Your marketing materials claim mathematical impossibility. Your sales presentations promise security that doesn't exist. Maybe someone wanted to demonstrate the difference between perception and reality. Talira's eyes narrowed. And you think embarrassing me publicly was the appropriate way to deliver that message? I think embarrassing you privately was a gift. A public demonstration would have destroyed your company's reputation permanently. A private wake-up call gives you the opportunity to fix the problems before someone else exploits them maliciously. The admission hung between them like a confession. Kendrick realized he'd revealed too much, confirmed her suspicions while trying to explain his motivations. Talira sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly looking less like a corporate predator and more like someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. Who are you really, Kendrick Kelther? And don't tell me you're just a janitor with a hobby. Janitors don't develop sophisticated intrusion methodologies or speak fluent cybersecurity theory. From the living room, Jamie's voice called out, "Dad, should I tell her about your old job?" Kendrick closed his eyes, feeling the careful construction of his new life beginning to crumble. "Jamie, please stay focused on your homework." But Talira was already moving toward the living room. "What old job, Jamie? Dad used to be really important. He worked with computers and helped people protect their money from bad guys. But then, some really mean people made him stop, and now he has to clean buildings instead." Talira returned to the kitchen with an expression of dawning understanding. "You were in financial technology, high-level security work. What happened? Why are you cleaning offices instead of running them?" Kendrick looked toward the living room where his daughter was pretending to work on mathematics, while actually managing a crisis that would determine their future. Everything he'd built to protect her was falling apart, and the decision he'd made 5 years ago to prioritize her safety over his own pride was about to be tested again. "Ms. Norrell," he said quietly, "some stories don't have happy endings. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you care about. And sometimes the only way to protect what matters most is to disappear completely. But you didn't disappear, did you? You just changed costumes." Kendrick met her eyes directly. For the first time since she'd arrived. "I did what I had to do to keep my daughter safe and give her a chance at a normal life. Everything else is just details." Talira stared at him for a long moment, seeing past the janitor's uniform to the man beneath. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different tone entirely. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to have a much longer conversation." 3 hours later, Jamie was asleep in her bedroom while Kendrick and Talira sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, 2 empty coffee cups between them, and the weight of truth settling like dust after an explosion. Talira had called her driver and canceled her evening appointments. This conversation was too important to rush. "Meridian Financial," she said, scrolling through news articles on her tablet. "The whistleblower case that brought down half their executive team. Dr. Kendrick Kelther, Chief Information Security Officer, exposed a $2 billion fraud scheme." She looked up at him. "The articles say you were a hero." "The articles said a lot of things that weren't entirely accurate. They also say you pleaded guilty to computer fraud charges." Her voice carried no judgment, only curiosity about how the pieces fit together. Kendrick leaned back in his chair, studying this woman who had arrived as an adversary but was beginning to feel like something else entirely. "The government needed my cooperation to prosecute the executives. Admitting to unauthorized access was the price of bringing down the real criminals. But it cost you everything. Not everything." He glanced toward Jamie's bedroom. "The most important thing survived." Talira followed his gaze, understanding dawning in her expression. "Your daughter doesn't know the full story, does she? She knows her father used to have a different job and that some people were unfair to him. That's enough for now. When she's older, when she can understand the complexities of choosing between legal technicalities and moral imperatives, I'll tell her the rest. And you've been hiding ever since. Kendrick shook his head. I've been rebuilding. There's a difference between hiding and choosing a different path. I could have fought the charges, risked prison, and maybe won on appeal after years of legal battles. Instead, I chose to accept responsibility, serve my probation, and focus on being the father Jamie needed. But you never stopped being a cybersecurity expert. You can't stop being what you are. You can only choose how to use it. He gestured around the modest apartment. I use it to keep us safe, to solve problems quietly, and occasionally to remind arrogant tech executives that their systems aren't as secure as they pretend. Talira's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She glanced at it, and her expression darkened. Speaking of problems, mine just got significantly worse. What's wrong? What's wrong? She turned the tablet toward him, showing a breaking news alert from TechCrunch. NeoVault Technology stock plummets amid rumors of major security breach. The article cited unnamed sources claiming that the company's flagship, quantum encryption, had been compromised by an unknown attacker. Someone leaked the story, Talira said, her voice tight with controlled anger. My board is in emergency session. I'm getting calls from major clients threatening to terminate their contracts. 5 years of building trust, destroyed in a single news cycle. Kendrick read the article, noting the technical inaccuracies and sensationalized language. This isn't just a leak. Someone is actively trying to damage your company's reputation. Any ideas who might want to do that? In the cybersecurity industry, take your pick. You've disrupted a lot of established players, stolen market share from companies that thought they were untouchable. Corporate sabotage is more common than most people realize. Talira's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and grimaced. It's Harrison Blackwell, my board chairman. I have to take this. Kendrick listened to one side of what was clearly a difficult conversation. Talira's responses were terse, defensive, occasionally angry. When she finally hung up, she looked like someone who had just received a terminal diagnosis. They're calling for my resignation, she said quietly. The board thinks my mismanagement of the security incident has irreparably damaged the company's credibility. Harrison gave me 48 hours to find a solution or they'll vote me out. What kind of solution? Proof that our systems are actually secure. Demonstration that the breach was either fictional or insignificant. Something that restores client confidence and stops the stock hemorrhaging. Kendrick studied her face, seeing the same desperate determination he'd felt 5 years ago when everything he'd built was crumbling around him. And if you can't provide that proof, then I lose the company I spent 12 years building, and 3,000 employees lose their jobs because of 58 seconds of digital vandalism. She looked at him directly. You did this. You wanted to teach me a lesson about humility, and instead you might have destroyed everything I've worked for. The accusation hit harder than Kendrick expected. He'd intended to deliver a private warning, not trigger a corporate catastrophe. But he also recognized the deeper problem that his breach had exposed. Talira, your company's reputation isn't being destroyed because I accessed your workstation. It's being destroyed because your actual security doesn't match your marketing claims. If your systems were truly as secure as you advertise, my little demonstration would have been impossible. So this is my fault for overselling our capabilities? This is the industry's fault for treating cybersecurity like a magic trick instead of an engineering discipline. You're selling the illusion of perfect protection instead of realistic threat mitigation. Talira stood and walked to the window, staring out at the Phoenix night. Easy to say when you're not responsible for investor confidence and client retention. I can't market pretty good security with occasional vulnerabilities. I have to promise protection, or companies go to my competitors who will. And when those promises prove false, as they inevitably do, everyone suffers. Clients lose trust. In the entire industry, legitimate security firms struggle to compete with false claims. And people like you get scapegoated for systemic problems. She turned back to face him. So what do you suggest I do? Admit that perfect security is impossible and watch my company collapse anyway? Kendrick considered the question carefully. This was exactly the kind of ethical dilemma that had destroyed his previous life, the choice between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths. I suggest you prove that your security is good enough to matter, even if it's not perfect enough to market. How? Live demonstration. Real-time, public test of your systems by someone with genuine capabilities. Not marketing theater, but actual technical validation. Talira laughed bitterly. And where exactly would I find someone willing to publicly test our systems? The kind of expert who could provide credible validation isn't going to risk their reputation on a demonstration that might fail. Kendrick met her eyes steadily. You're looking at him. You? You'd be willing to help me after what this conversation has cost both of us? I'd be willing to help you demonstrate the truth, whatever that turns out to be. If your systems can withstand a determined attack by someone who knows their weaknesses, that's worth more than any marketing campaign. If they can't, then you have bigger problems than stock prices. Talira sat back down, studying his face for signs of deception or ulterior motive. What would you want in return? Nothing that you can give me, Kendrick said honestly. My reputation is already destroyed, my career is already over, and my freedom is already constrained by the choices I made 5 years ago. But maybe I can help you avoid making the same mistakes I did, which were believing that being right was more important than being smart, thinking that exposing the truth would automatically lead to justice, assuming that good intentions would protect me from the consequences of necessary actions. Talira's phone buzzed again with another urgent message. She glanced at it and swore softly. 3 more clients just suspended their contracts pending investigation of the security breach. We're looking at tens of millions in lost revenue. Then we better get started. Started on what? Kendrick smiled for the first time since he'd arrived at his apartment, proving that Kendrick Kelther still knows how to do the impossible. The emergency board meeting convened at 6 a.m. in NeoVault's most secure conference room, where holographic displays showed real-time damage reports that looked like a medical emergency in progress. Stock price down 18%, 6 major clients threatening contract termination, and technology news outlets describing the breach as evidence that even cybersecurity companies can't protect themselves. Talira entered the room to find 11 board members arranged like a tribunal, their faces expressing varying degrees of concern, anger, and poorly concealed anticipation. Harrison Blackwell sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Behind wire-rimmed glasses that reflected the glow of financial data scrolling across multiple screens. Talira, Harrison said without preamble, we need immediate damage control. What's your plan? She activated her personal tablet and projected a presentation she'd prepared at 4 a.m. after leaving Kendrick's apartment. I'm proposing a live public demonstration of our security capabilities. Real-time penetration testing by a qualified expert, broadcast to industry leaders and potential clients. Board member Victoria Chun leaned forward skeptically. That's an enormous risk. If the demonstration fails, we're finished. If we don't demonstrate our capabilities, we're finished anyway, Talira replied. Client confidence is gone. Market credibility is destroyed. We either prove our systems work under pressure, or we admit defeat. Who would conduct this test? Asked Robert Morrison, the former CIA director who served as the board's security oversight specialist. We'd need someone with unquestionable credentials and no conflicts of interest. Talira had anticipated this question, but her answer was going to create more problems than it solved. I've identified a consultant with the necessary expertise. Someone who successfully penetrated our systems before and understands our vulnerabilities better than anyone. Harrison's expression sharpened. You're talking about whoever was responsible for the original breach. I'm talking about someone who can provide credible, independent validation of our security measures. Talira, Victoria said slowly. Are you seriously suggesting we hire the person who attacked us to publicly test our defenses? I'm suggesting we hire the person most qualified to determine whether our defenses are adequate. The room erupted in heated discussion. Board members argued about liability, public relations risks, and the optics of appearing to negotiate with cyber criminals. Talira let them debate while monitoring her phone, where messages continued arriving about contract cancellations and competitor companies offering to rescue NeoVault clients. Finally, Harrison called for quiet. Let's assume for a moment that this plan isn't completely insane. What exactly are you proposing? Talira activated another slide. Live demonstration, tomorrow afternoon, broadcast to invited industry observers. The consultant attempts to penetrate our most secure system, the quantum encrypted database protecting our client financial information while our security team defends in real time. And if they succeed, then we acknowledge the vulnerability exists and demonstrate our ability to detect and respond to sophisticated attacks. And if they fail, then we prove our systems can withstand assault by someone who's already demonstrated advanced capabilities. Robert Morrison studied the proposal with professional interest. What's the stakes? How do we ensure this isn't just theater? This was the moment Talira had been dreading, the part of her plan that would either save her company or end her career. The consultant has agreed to attempt unauthorized access to our primary financial system, which currently protects over $2 billion in client assets. Success means full system penetration within 60 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria Chun was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. You want to bet our entire company on a 60-second hacking demonstration? I want to prove that our security measures are strong, enough to protect our clients' most valuable assets under the most extreme circumstances. Harrison removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture Talira recognized as his way of buying time to think. And what happens to this consultant after the demonstration? That depends on the results. Talira, if someone successfully penetrates our financial systems, even in a controlled demonstration, we're legally obligated to report it to federal authorities. Your consultant would be subject to prosecution for computer fraud. The consultant understands the risks. Do you? Victoria asked pointedly. If this demonstration fails, you'll be responsible for the largest publicly witnessed cybersecurity failure in corporate history. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed permanently. Talira looked around the room at faces that had once supported her vision and now questioned her judgment. These people had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in her leadership, trusted her to protect their investment, and watched her build NeoVault into an industry leader. Now they were watching her risk everything on what appeared to be a desperate gamble. My career is already over if we don't restore client confidence immediately, she said. Our reputation is already destroyed if we can't prove our systems work as advertised. This demonstration either validates our technology or exposes problems that were going to surface eventually anyway. Harrison replaced his glasses and consulted his tablet. I've been reviewing the financial projections. If current client defection continues for another week, we're looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. The short-term damage is already catastrophic. So, we have nothing left to lose? We have everything left to lose, he corrected. But we're going to lose it anyway unless something changes dramatically and immediately. He looked around the table, measuring the expressions of his fellow board members. All in favor of authorizing Talira's demonstration? The vote was closer than she'd expected. 6 in favor, 5 opposed. Just enough to proceed, but not enough to provide real support if things went wrong. Motion passes, Harrison announced. Talira, you have until 2 p.m. tomorrow to either save this company or finish destroying it. After the board members left, Talira sat alone in the conference room, staring at financial charts that showed her life's work disappearing in real time. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Kendrick. Saw the news about tomorrow's demonstration. Are you sure you want to do this? She typed back, too late to back down now. Are you ready? His response came immediately. I've been ready for 5 years. Talira smiled grimly. Tomorrow afternoon, in front of industry leaders, federal investigators, and her own employees, she was going to watch a former whistleblower either save her company or destroy it completely. Either way, the pretense would finally be over. The Meridian Tower's 42nd floor had been transformed into a technological coliseum. NeoVault's largest conference room now housed representatives from 12 major corporations, 4 government agencies, and 6 technology news outlets, all gathered to witness what industry blogs were calling the most audacious cybersecurity demonstration in corporate history. Talira stood at the front of the room, projecting confidence she didn't feel while technicians completed final preparations on the system that would determine her fate. Behind her, massive screens displayed real-time monitoring of NeoVault's quantum-encrypted financial database, currently protecting $2.3 billion in client assets. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, what you're about to witness is not a marketing presentation or carefully staged demonstration. This is a live, unscripted test of our security measures under actual attack conditions. In the back of the room, FBI Special Agent Patricia Russo took notes while federal prosecutors prepared to evaluate whether the demonstration constituted legitimate security testing or criminal computer fraud. The legal implications were staggering, but Talira had passed the point where legal considerations mattered more than corporate survival. Our systems will be tested by an independent consultant who has previously demonstrated the ability to penetrate our defenses. Talira continued. Success is defined as unauthorized access to our primary financial database within 60 seconds. Failure means our security measures successfully prevented the intrusion. She gestured to the side door. I'd like to introduce our consultant. Kendrick entered wearing a simple black polo shirt and khakis, looking nothing like the stereotypical image of an elite hacker. No dramatic entrance, no theatrical costume. Just a quiet man carrying a standard laptop and the weight of everyone's expectations. The audience murmured with confusion and disappointment. Several attendees had expected someone younger, more eccentric, possibly with exotic accent or elaborate equipment. What they got was a middle-aged father who looked like he might work in customer service. Harrison Blackwell leaned over to Victoria Chun. This is Talira's secret weapon. He looks like an accountant. Kendrick approached the workstation that had been prepared for his use, connected his laptop to the isolated testing network, and began a methodical equipment check. No dramatic gestures, no unnecessary commentary, just professional preparation that somehow made the room more tense rather than less. Before we begin, Talira announced, I want everyone to understand what's at stake. This system protects real financial assets belonging to actual clients. If our consultant succeeds, those assets will be temporarily vulnerable. If they fail, our security measures will have been validated under the most extreme conditions possible. Agent Russo stood up. For the record, NeoVault Technologies has received temporary authorization from relevant federal agencies to conduct this demonstration under controlled conditions. However, any unauthorized access achieved will be subject to immediate investigation and potential prosecution. Kendrick looked up from his laptop for the first time since entering the room. Understood. Let the record also show that I'm participating voluntarily and accept full responsibility for my actions. The formalities completed, Talira moved to her own workstation where she could monitor system defenses in real time. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Kelther. Kendrick's fingers moved across his keyboard with practiced efficiency, but there was Nothing flashy about his approach. No rapid-fire typing, no dramatic sound effects. Just methodical exploration of network architecture that most observers couldn't follow. On the monitoring screens, NeoVault's security team watched intrusion. Detection algorithms activate as probing attempts began appearing across multiple system entry points. The attacks were subtle, sophisticated, designed to test response mechanisms rather than trigger obvious alarms. "Initial reconnaissance complete," Kendrick announced without looking up from his screen. "Beginning active penetration sequence." What happened next would be debated in cybersecurity circles for years afterward. Kendrick's approach wasn't the brute force attack most observers expected, nor was it the exotic zero-day exploit that government analysts feared. Instead, he began systematically exploiting trust relationships between legitimate system components, using the network's own security protocols against itself. "He's not attacking our defenses," whispered Amanda Foster, NeoVault's head of security. "He's convincing them he belongs here." On the display screens, security alerts began cascading as monitoring systems detected unusual but not clearly malicious activity. Database queries that appeared routine, but accessed information in unexpected patterns. Authentication requests that seemed legitimate, but came from sources that couldn't be verified. 30 seconds remaining, Talira announced, her voice steady. Despite the growing realization that their defenses were being systematically dismantled, Kendrick's typing accelerated slightly, his approach shifting from reconnaissance to execution. The screens showed privilege escalation attempts, firewall reconfigurations, and encryption key manipulations happening so quickly that human operators couldn't respond in real time. 15 seconds. The room fell completely silent except for the subtle clicking of Kendrick's keyboard and the humming of cooling systems, working to manage servers under unprecedented stress. 10 seconds. Agent Russo leaned forward, pen poised over her notepad. 5. Kendrick's hands stopped moving. He leaned back in his chair and spoke in the same quiet voice he'd used throughout the demonstration. "Access granted." The main display screen flickered, then displayed the NeoVault financial database's primary interface with full administrative privileges clearly visible. Account balances, transaction histories, client information, everything protected by quantum. Encryption and multiple security layers was now completely accessible. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and hurried conversations. Several corporate representatives immediately began placing urgent phone calls, while government observers started taking detailed notes about what they'd witnessed. But Kendrick wasn't finished. "However," he said, raising his voice slightly to cut through the noise, "I should point out that while I successfully gained access to the system, every action I took was logged, monitored, and traceable through your security infrastructure." He gestured to a secondary screen that displayed a complete audit trail of his intrusion. "Your defenses didn't prevent my access, but they did create a comprehensive record of exactly how it was achieved. Which means you can now patch these specific vulnerabilities and implement countermeasures that would prevent this exact attack from succeeding again." Talira stared at the screens, understanding dawning on her face. "You weren't just trying to break in. You were showing us how to fix the problems. I was demonstrating the difference between security theater and actual protection. Your marketing claims promise perfection, but real security is about detection, response, and recovery. Your systems performed exactly as they should have under these circumstances." Agent Russo closed her notepad and approached the workstation. "Mr. Kelther, you understand that you've just committed federal computer fraud in front of multiple law enforcement witnesses." Kendrick looked up at her calmly. "Yes, ma'am. I also just demonstrated that NeoVault's security measures are substantially more effective than their own marketing department realizes." Harrison Blackwell stood up slowly. "Are you saying that this demonstration proves our systems work?" "I'm saying this demonstration proves your systems are good enough to matter, even when they're not perfect enough to market, which is exactly what real cybersecurity should be. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. NeoVault security had been breached, but had also been validated. The attack had succeeded, but it had also been completely documented and traced. Most importantly, Kendrick Kelther had just proven that he was exactly who he claimed to be. Someone willing to sacrifice everything to expose the truth, even when that truth was complicated and inconvenient. Lyra looked around the room at representatives who had come expecting to witness either triumph or disaster, and instead had seen something much more valuable: honest assessment of real capabilities under actual pressure. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I believe we've just redefined what cybersecurity demonstration should look like." But as federal agents approached to place Kendrick under arrest for computer fraud, she realized that redemption always came with a price, and sometimes the people willing to pay that price were the ones least able to afford it. Agent Russo had taken exactly 3 steps toward Kendrick when Harrison Blackwell's voice cut through the conference room like a blade. "Agent Russo, a moment please." The FBI agent paused, her handcuffs halfway out of her jacket. Around the room, corporate representatives and government observers watched as Harrison stood up with the deliberate authority of someone accustomed to reshaping reality through sheer force of will. "Mr. Blackwell," Agent Russo said carefully, "federal computer fraud statutes are quite clear about unauthorized access to protected systems." "Indeed they are," Harrison replied, walking toward the front of the room where Kendrick sat calmly at his workstation. "But I believe there may be some confusion about the authorization status of today's demonstration." He gestured to his briefcase, from which he produced a legal document that appeared to have been prepared well in advance. "This is a formal consulting agreement between NeoVault Technologies and K2 Security Solutions, dated 3 days ago, authorizing comprehensive penetration testing of our financial systems." Lyra stared at Harrison in shock. She had never heard of K2 Security Solutions, and certainly hadn't authorized any consulting agreements 3 days ago. "And this," Harrison continued, producing a second document, "is Mr. Kelther's business license for K2 Security Solutions, filed with the state of Arizona 18 months ago." Kendrick looked up from his laptop with an expression of mild surprise that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Of course you are," Harrison said smoothly. "K2 Security Solutions has been providing discrete cybersecurity consulting services to select clients for over a year. Very exclusive, very private, very effective. NeoVault hired your firm specifically because of your demonstrated ability to identify vulnerabilities that conventional testing misses." Agent Russo examined the documents with growing confusion. "These appear to be legitimate business filings and contracts." "They are legitimate," Harrison confirmed. "What you witnessed today wasn't a criminal intrusion, but an authorized security assessment conducted by an independent consultant under contract with NeoVault Technologies." The room buzzed with confused conversations as observers tried to process this unexpected development. Lyra approached Harrison with a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. "Harrison, what's happening here?" she asked quietly. "What's happening?" He replied in a voice only she could hear, "Is that I've been aware of Mr. Kelther's real identity and capabilities for considerably longer than you have. When you proposed this demonstration, I realized we had an opportunity to solve several problems simultaneously." "You knew who he was?" "I knew that our night custodian had been quietly fixing problems that our security team hadn't even detected. I knew that someone with extraordinary technical skills was choosing to work anonymously rather than seek recognition. And I knew that such a person might be exactly what NeoVault needed to differentiate ourselves in an increasingly competitive market." Harrison turned to address the room again. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is the future of cybersecurity assessment. Not marketing demonstrations or theoretical presentations, but real-world testing by professionals who understand both attack methodologies and defensive responses. Dr. Margaret Chun from the Department of Homeland Security raised her hand. Mr. Blackwell, are you saying that NeoVault has developed a new approach to security validation? I'm saying that NeoVault has identified talent where others see only limitations, and created opportunities where others see only problems. He gestured toward Kendrick. Mr. Kelther represents a new category of cybersecurity professional. Someone whose expertise is measured not by credentials or affiliations, but by results. Agent Russo closed her notepad with obvious reluctance. The documentation appears to be in order. If this was authorized penetration testing under a legitimate contract, then no federal laws were violated. She approached Kendrick directly. Mr. Kelther, you understand that this level of access to financial systems carries significant responsibility? Yes, ma'am. I also understand that with proper oversight and documentation, such access can be used to strengthen rather than exploit security measures. Robert Morrison from the board stood up. Are we to understand that NeoVault is announcing a new service offering, extreme penetration testing conducted by reformed hackers? Talira looked at Harrison, then at Kendrick, then at the room full of observers who had come expecting to witness either triumph or disaster, and instead had seen something unprecedented, a cybersecurity demonstration that proved both vulnerability and resilience simultaneously. We're announcing, she said slowly, that NeoVault has developed a new standard for security validation. We call it adversarial authentication, testing our defenses using the same methodologies that real attackers employ, but with full documentation and transparent reporting of both successes and failures. Victoria Chun leaned forward with interest. And this K2 Security Solutions would provide such testing for other organizations as well? Kendrick spoke for the first time since the documentation had appeared. K2 Security Solutions specializes in identifying security vulnerabilities that conventional testing overlooks. We work exclusively with organizations that prioritize transparency and authentic security improvement over marketing advantages. What kind of organizations? Asked Dr. Chun. The kind that understand the difference between being secure and appearing secure, Kendrick replied. Companies that want to know their real vulnerabilities before their enemies do. Agent Russo gathered her materials. Mr. Kelther, I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other in the future. The federal government has significant interest in this kind of testing methodology. After the observers began filing out, Talira found herself alone with Harrison and Kendrick in the conference room that had been transformed from a corporate coliseum back into a simple meeting space. Harrison, she said, I need to understand. What just happened here? What happened, Harrison replied, is that we've turned a crisis into an opportunity. Kendrick's breach exposed real problems with our security model, but his demonstration proved that those problems are fixable. More importantly, it proved that unconventional talent can provide solutions that conventional hiring never discovers. And the business license? The consulting agreement? Kendrick answered this time. Harrison contacted me yesterday evening after your visit to my apartment. He proposed that instead of prosecuting me for unauthorized access, NeoVault could formalize our relationship and turn my capabilities into a competitive advantage. But why? Harrison smiled. Because Talira, you've spent 12 years building a company that promises to protect people from cybersecurity threats. But you've been doing it using the same approaches, the same personnel, and the same assumptions as everyone else in the industry. Kendrick represents something different, genuine expertise applied without regard for conventional limitations. So K2 Security Solutions is real? As of yesterday, yes, Kendrick said. I've been performing informal security consulting for various organizations for the past year. Harrison's offer simply provides a framework for formalizing that work and expanding its scope. Talira walked to the window overlooking downtown Phoenix, processing the implications of what had just occurred. Her company had survived its most serious crisis, but only by embracing exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that traditional corporate structures typically rejected. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Harrison said, "we implement a partnership that allows K2 Security Solutions to provide specialized testing services while NeoVault maintains its position as the industry leader in quantum encryption and defensive technologies." "And Kendrick continues working as a janitor?" Kendrick stood up and began disconnecting his laptop. "Kendrick continues working as whatever provides the best life for his daughter, while using his capabilities to solve problems that matter, which might occasionally include mopping floors, which might occasionally include anything that needs to be done properly." That evening, as the Phoenix sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Kendrick arrived at his apartment to find Jamie waiting with her homework spread across the kitchen table and a dozen questions about why her father had been on the technology news. "So you're not in trouble?" she asked as he helped her with an algebra problem that most high school students would struggle to understand. "No, sweetheart, I'm not in trouble. In fact, I think things might be getting better." "Does that mean you don't have to clean buildings anymore?" Kendrick considered the question carefully. "It means I get to choose how to use my skills to help people. Sometimes that might mean cleaning buildings. Sometimes it might mean fixing computer problems. Sometimes it might mean protecting people from bad guys who use computers to steal things." Jamie nodded seriously. "Like a secret superhero who also knows how to use a mop?" "Exactly like that." As they worked through her mathematics homework together, Kendrick realized that for the first time in 5 years, he wasn't hiding from his past or his capabilities. He was simply choosing how to use them in ways that honored both his talents and his responsibilities as a father. The next morning, K2 Security Solutions received its first official contract from a major corporation that had witnessed the previous day's demonstration. By the end of the week, they had 17 inquiries from organizations seeking adversarial authentication services. And somewhere in the NeoVault building, a different night custodian was quietly mopping floors while Kendrick Kelther worked from a proper office, using his real name and genuine expertise to solve problems that mattered. But he kept the janitor's uniform in his closet, just in case he ever needed to remember where real work actually happened. 6 months later, the cybersecurity industry had quietly transformed in ways that most people never noticed but everyone benefited from. The NeoVault demonstration, as it became known in professional circles, had sparked a movement toward authentic security testing that spread far beyond the conference room where it began. K2 Security Solutions now employed 12 former custodians, maintenance workers, and night shift employees who had been quietly observing and solving problems in corporate environments for years. Each had been discovered through word-of-mouth recommendations from organizations that learned to look past job titles to find genuine expertise. Maria Santos, who had cleaned medical offices for 8 years while secretly identifying HIPAA violations that could have cost hospitals millions in fines, now served as K2's healthcare compliance specialist. Tommy Rodriguez, whose maintenance work had given him intimate knowledge of manufacturing security weaknesses, headed their industrial systems division. The ripple effects extended far beyond cybersecurity. Major corporations began implementing hidden talent initiatives, formal programs designed to identify employees whose capabilities exceeded their current roles. Universities started offering unconventional expertise scholarships for students whose knowledge came from experience, rather than traditional education. Most importantly, the story had inspired thousands of people to reconsider the assumptions they made about the capabilities of those around them. At Jefferson Elementary School in Phoenix, where Jamie was now in 4th grade, her teacher Mrs. Patterson noticed Something remarkable happening. Students were beginning to ask different questions about the custodial staff, the cafeteria workers, and the crossing guards. Instead of ignoring the adults who kept their school running, they were curious about their stories, their skills, and their dreams. "My dad says everyone has hidden superpowers," Jamie explained to her class during a presentation about careers. "Sometimes the most important people are the ones nobody notices." The presentation included photographs of Kendrick at work, both in his consulting office and occasionally still helping with building maintenance, when complex problems required someone who understood both technology and infrastructure. Jamie had titled her project, "Why My Dad is a Real Superhero, Even When He's Not Wearing a Cape." Meanwhile, across town at Neovault Technologies, Talira stood before a packed auditorium delivering the keynote address at the Global Cybersecurity Innovation Summit. Her presentation, "Beyond Credentials, Finding Excellence in Unexpected Places," had become one of the most requested talks in the industry. "6 months ago," she told the audience, "I almost fired the most talented cybersecurity expert my company had ever encountered because I couldn't see past his job title. Today, that man leads our most successful consulting division and has helped transform how our entire industry approaches talent identification." The audience included executives from Fortune 500 companies, government officials, and academics from leading universities. But it also included custodians, security guards, and maintenance workers whose employers had finally recognized that proximity to systems often created understanding that formal education couldn't match. Harrison Blackwell, now serving as chairman of the newly established National Foundation for Unconventional Talent, announced the launch of programs designed to identify and develop expertise wherever it existed. "We've learned that genius doesn't follow conventional career paths," he sighed. "Our job is to create opportunities for extraordinary people to contribute in extraordinary ways, regardless of how they discovered their capabilities." But perhaps the most significant change was happening in places where no cameras recorded and no headlines announced the transformation. In office buildings across the country, executives were having different conversations with night shift workers. In hospitals, administrators were listening more carefully to cleaning staff observations about patient care. In schools, principals were asking custodians about building, security and maintenance workers about infrastructure improvements. The assumption that job titles determined capabilities was slowly being replaced by the recognition that talent could emerge anywhere, at any time, in any form. Late one evening, as Kendrick finished reviewing security protocols for a major bank's digital infrastructure, he received a text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Saw your story on the news. I've been working security at a tech company for 3 years, watching them make mistakes that could cost millions. I think I might have something to contribute. Can we talk? David C." Kendrick smiled and typed back, "Everyone has something to contribute. The question is whether we're brave enough to let them." As he prepared to leave his office, Kendrick looked out at the Phoenix skyline where thousands of people were working night shifts, solving problems and demonstrating capabilities that might never be formally recognized. Somewhere among them were the next generation of hidden experts, waiting for someone to notice that brilliance came in many forms. He thought about Jamie, now confidently telling anyone who would listen that her father was proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when given the chance. She was right, of course. She had always been right. The real question was how many other extraordinary people were still waiting for their chance to prove that genius had never been about credentials, degrees, or job titles. It had always been about seeing clearly, thinking differently, and having the courage to act when action mattered most. And that potential existed everywhere, in everyone, waiting to be discovered by anyone wise enough to look beyond the surface and see the truth underneath. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.